Hey there, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. We are back with another week on Rome. We are talking about the Roman Empire, but first, we are actually going to talk about, well, Julius Caesar and the fall of the Roman Republic, because it is Julius Caesar who's really going to be the first emperor of Rome. So, as Roman politics, got increasingly factional where we left off last time, the Roman territory got increasingly massive. And as a result, things started getting increasingly civil war-y. And that's kind of where we left off in the last slides, right? A big slide about all of the different types of civil wars. And that is actually where we're going to pick up in our next slide. Okay, this is going to look really familiar, right? Now, Rome barely had, a decade between 135 and 30 BCE without being on the verge of collapsing into some kind of variety of civil war. It's honestly a minor miracle that Rome didn't permanently tear itself in half before we even got to Caesar. Now, historians often ask whether the Roman Republic, not Rome as a whole, but specifically the Republican system of government, was doomed to fail or whether it actually had a chance of survival. Now, the reason why I bring this up is I'm sure many of you already know how I'd answer, but it's because the answer really matters when we look at people like Julius Caesar or Caesar Augustus. And that's because when we discuss what they did, we have to decide whether or not they went too far. Now, I believe that the Republic had almost no chance of surviving on its own, but that's because it had already long been broken, as we learned with the Gracchi brothers and suddenly, with the outbreak of having political violence. And once you shatter the idea, the premise, once you have crossed a taboo of sorts in a republic, you have broken it beyond repair and you cannot mend it any longer. So once Rome finally had actual political violence, went so far as to kill a consul who was running for re-election, that was it. The Roman Republic was doomed from the time that they killed Tiberius Gracchus. And that's the thing, is it had already long been broken. I argue that the Roman Republic was an empire long before it had an emperor because expansion is one of the many things that, is something that is deemed to be an imperialistic empire. But besides that, we all know what kind of mess the Roman Republic was in, the last 100 years before the actual fall of the Republic. It is up here on the screen for you. Look at this mess. I mean, literally, it's like sometimes 10, 5, they can't go 30 years without having a different kind of civil war. Now, imagine if our society was like that. That would be crazy. So, with the Republic on its last legs, let's meet the guy who is going to take it out back and kill it dead. And that guy is Julius Caesar. But who was Julius Caesar? Well, to establish that for all of you, to really get you guys to understand the type of guy that, Caesar really was, I'm going to tell you a tale about some Sicilian pirates. So hang in there with me. Now, when Caesar was in his early 20s, he managed to get himself captured by a band of pirates who wanted to ransom him off for 20 talents of silver. Now, there's no agreed upon conversion between talents and US dollars, but for our purposes, let's pretend that 1 talent is about $100,000. Okay, so when Caesar heard this sum, 20 talents, so let's pretend that's, 200,000, no, that's way more than 200,000, sorry, that's like, what, 2 million or something? I don't math, this is history class. He straight up laughed at them when they told him, yeah, we're gonna try and, basically ransom you off for 20 talents. So he laughs at them and he demands that they ask for much more, something more respectable like 50 talents instead. And the pirates, charmed by Caesar's overwhelming diviness, and his razor-sharp cheekbones because he was kind of sexy, they were all too happy to keep him around for the sheer entertainment factor that was Julius Caesar. Now, he played games with them, he told stories, he even wrote poems and speeches for them. Sometimes they would joke about his speeches being bad, and Caesar would respond by saying when he got free, he would come back and crucify every last one of them, which the pirates apparently thought was absolutely hilarious. Eventually, the pirates did get their 50 talents, which is funny because originally they just wanted 20, and Caesar was like, I'm worth way more than that, hello. So they get their 50 talents, and they let Caesar go. And quicker than shit, Caesar came back with a bunch of ships, arrested all of them, casually taken his 50 talents back. Now, he brought the pirates to the provincial governor, which was like the governor of a province that was local, and since he didn't really seem to care all that much, Caesar took matters into his own hands. The governor didn't care that much. So Caesar takes the matter into his own hands, and he took the high road by keeping his promise and, yeah, crucifying all of them. That really happened. The moral of the story here is that Caesar cares a lot about his image, right? He's amazingly charismatic. He's not afraid to take matters into his own hands if he needs to, and he does not mess around. So now that you understand how Caesar works, okay, let's talk about how Caesar gained power. Now, Gaius Julius Caesar was a well-to-do nobleman from a very prestigious family that traced its ancestry back to the epic hero Aeneas. We talked about Aeneas last week when I talked about the establishment of Rome. He was the original Trojan that fled from the burning city of Troy and landed on Italy to establish what will later be Rome. Now, Caesar kind of had a chip on his shoulder, even though he, supposedly had this really prestigious ancestry, because see, his dad was never consul, and that's one of the highest honors that you could have in Roman society. In Roman culture, as we've seen in previous lectures, the concept of nobility and that you can inherit excellence is there. But you have to confirm that excellence by doing excellent things in the present. So if you have a father or an uncle or something like that who did amazing things, who did excellent things, you yourself, because you are related to them, you can inherit that excellence. However, while you're given the benefit of the doubt, you still have to confirm it by doing excellent things in the present. I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, well, then come see me in office hours on Thursday and I can explain it further, I suppose. Now, unlike basically every other age, you couldn't just coast on your familiar prestige. You had to actually do something for it in ancient Rome. That's what this is saying. So while you can inherit excellence, you have to actually try. You can't just be like, oh, well, I am the Duke of York and therefore I'm just better than everybody else. Okay, I don't know why I did a French accent when clearly the Duke of York is supposed to be British. Just, scratch that. Don't worry about it. Anyways, that's why Caesar's dad not being consul was actually a really big deal, because Caesar's primary goal in life was to confirm his nobility status, and he could do that by just being consul. Now, in order to be consul, he had to strike up a deal with two other prominent Romans, Crassus, who is the richest man in Rome, and Pompey, who was Rome's most accomplished general at the time. Now they created an informal alliance, and they made it what will essentially be the first triumvirate. Gosh, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time talking today. They were all good friends. Pompey married Caesar's daughter. Crassus bribed Caesar's way into consulship in 59 BCE. And Caesar passed all of the laws that Pompey and Crassus wanted. So, to be honest, it was kind of an all-around good time for everyone involved. Well, I mean the main three in power. So Caesar is now in power. Now, in the process of ramming through debt forgiveness and land redistribution legislation, Caesar definitely broke several procedural norms, and he did things that were straight up illegal. But since he was consul, he had something called imperium. Now, what imperium is diplomatic immunity. Okay, so it meant that he couldn't be prosecuted for his actions while he was in office. And that's very important here because he is doing a bunch of illegal stuff. One, he's regularly overriding the veto of his co-consul, because remember, there are two consuls, so they are co-consuls. They have veto power over each other. Usually, the whole entire premise of veto power is so that way, the people get the best of both worlds, so they have the people's interest in heart. Unfortunately, Caesar was regularly overriding his co-consul on the principle of because I said so. And then Caesar started filling the city with legionnaires to dissuade his political opponents. And this is a definite no-no in the eyes of the Roman elite. But unfortunately, no one could really do anything about it because one, Caesar is consul, he had imperium, he had diplomatic immunity, so nobody can actually bring him up on any, charges for his actions. And two, he has legionnaires, which are soldiers, in the city, trying to stop people from speaking out against Caesar. So no one's going to say anything anyways, right? Now, we aren't going to go into detail about all the shady but also kind of brilliant stuff that went down during Caesar's consulship, but if you're interested, shoot me an email and I will give you a book recommendation or a YouTube video rec. It's entirely up to you. Anyway, for Caesar's year in power, he was safe. But once that consulship and his imperium expired, Caesar had a huge target on his back because he did a bunch of illegal stuff. So he needed to find a way to keep his imperium until he was allowed to run for consul again, which is 10 years later. Okay, you can only run for consul every 10 years after you've served a certain amount of terms. Now, conveniently, generals also have imperium, so Caesar's next move was to secure himself a governorship of a province, and the command of a few legions, so he could go around campaigning with all of the imperium in the world until he could stand for consul again. Now, some senators, fearing that Caesar would do literally exactly that, tried to swap his guarantee for governor of a province for essentially a governor of an Italian wood, like the woods, like a forest. However, Caesar has allies, and those allies are Pompey and Crassus. Again, they had enough power to overturn that. So they overturned the senators that are like, oh no, Caesar is going to totally get imperium again. We're not going to be able to bring him up on charges and all the shady shit that he just got done doing as consul. And so what we're going to do is we're going to swap out his governorship for a province and instead give him a governorship over something that doesn't matter. So that way, he can't raise legions and he can't be a general and we can totally bring him up on all of the illegal stuff that he's been doing. But having political allies is always a good thing. So Pompey and Crassus say, yeah, no, we're going to definitely overturn that. Coins and stabby things tend to get you a lot in life. But here we can see just how fragile the Republic really was at this point. Anyone with enough connections and resources could effectively cripple the normal flow of government and could steer it in favorable directions for their own benefit. That's what's important here, okay? It's not just that Caesar, breaks and kills the Republic. The Republic was already broken, and you can see how broken it already is just through the actions of Caesar. So Caesar, he got himself 4 legions and a cushy governorship in southern Gaul, along with a metric buttload of military imperium, okay, which is what he wanted, right? That diplomatic immunity in order to keep himself safe. And he sets about campaigning in Gaul for the next 10 years. It's astounding how much we know in detail about these campaigns, and it's because Caesar himself wrote extensive commentaries on them. And this is crucial too, because he could justify his continued campaign in Gaul year after year by showing how awesome he was at war and how great of a job he was doing through his own writings. That's why he kept such detailed blogs of his Gaul campaigns. While he was also building up support amongst the Roman people by showing how awesome he was at war and how great of a job he was doing. Amazing! All right, so we don't spend, another, several hours on Rome, and, we need to keep our schedule, our timeline, so we're only doing the Roman, Republic, the Roman Empire, and then the collapse of the empire next week, okay? So to keep Rome in 3 weeks, I can't go over Caesar's campaigns. However, I am going to give you a seriously condensed version of how Caesar's campaign went, okay? Because we just simply don't have the time to go into detail. So here we go. Oh wait, I think I have another slide. So never mind, I will see you in the next slide. Look at that. For once I was actually paying attention to my slides and I was like, I've run out of stuff to talk on this slide. There must be another one. I apologize. Sometimes I miss putting a slide memo into my lecture notes. Okay, so let's go over this seriously condensed version of how Caesar's campaigns went. So in 58 BCE, Caesar attacked the Helvetii tribe on the pretense that they were attacking an ally of Rome. Because remember, Rome would never be so crass as to attack unprovoked, right? Because they win defensively. At the end of each year's campaigning season, Caesar left his armies in Gaul and spent the winters in northern Italy. Now the next year, Caesar went north, he won a battle, and he got ambushed one time. In 56 BCE, Caesar claimed that the Veneti tribe was, or that they had revolted from Rome, even though they really hadn't. But regardless, he decided to go and conquer it. It's safe to say at this point that Caesar functionally considered all of Gaul already his. I mean, Rome's, all of Rome's. Yeah, definitely Rome's, not just his. Now, the next year, Caesar went really hard on the Gaul is Roman thing, okay? And he considered Britain and Germany as threats to Gaul, and therefore as threats to Rome. So again, because Rome fights wars defensively, in that same year, he bridged the Rhine, which is a river, for those of you that don't know, and he attacked some Germans. And then he sailed across the English Channel. This man is insane, I swear. The invasion of Britain was honestly a total bust. So the next year he went back with a huge fleet because the man can't leave well enough alone, and he pushed as far north as the Thames River. Okay, and if you don't know geography of Europe, open a map. I don't have one on here for you, but it's not really that relevant. The point is that you need to know that Julius Caesar essentially went to war with both Germany and England because of them being a possible threat to Gaul, which is north of Italy. It's really complex and complicated. Basically, Caesar just wanted to look like a badass, but he had to do it defensively. So he had to figure out a way to defensively be a badass. So in 53 BCE, he went back to Germany, and afterwards he left half of his bridge still standing in a sort of "don't make me come back here" power play. And the following year, in 52 BCE, that was probably the biggest year of his campaign because King blah 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 blah. Yeah, I'm not even going to try that. Vercingetorix? Vercingetorix. King Vercingetorix? Ooh, what a complex name. He had unified the remaining Gallic tribes against Rome. He said, listen, not all of Gaul is Roman. We don't like you, and we are going to, fight for our land. And after some battling back and forth, the King Vercingetorix camped out on a fortified hill called Alesia. Now Caesar, he needed to surround and wall off the city in order to starve it out. So this is a fortified hill city, okay, is what Alesia is. It's a fortified hill city. So what Caesar decided to do is basically siege warfare, okay? So he had to he had to surround and wall off the city in order to starve it out. And there was also the likelihood that he would get attacked while besieging the city because there are other people surrounding the Gallic tribes that don't like him very much. You guys, Caesar needed to fortify in both directions. His army built a 10-mile-long wall on the inside and a 14-mile-long wall on the outside. That is 24 miles of wall that Caesar threw down because he was determined to take the city. But oh snap. The next thing you know, a ton of angry Gauls come down and attack Caesar. So Caesar rolls a nat 20 on his deception check. He sends out a cavalry detachment to attack them, but the Gauls think that it's the first of an entire Roman reinforcement force, so they panic and they book it right the hell out of there. Okay, let this sink in. So Caesar doesn't actually have a whole lot of army. So what he does is when the Gauls are attacking, he sends out a cavalry attachment to attack them back. But the Gauls are basically deceived into believing that this is the first of an entire Roman reinforcement force. And so they panic and they flee. All right, this allowed Caesar to take the city, and just like that, Gaul basically became and belonged to Caesar. This is a crazy tell, and if you don't know what I mean by Caesar rolled a nat 20 on his deception check, that is a D&D phrase. It basically just means that he was really charismatic, and he tricked his enemy into believing he had more military than he actually did. And yeah, that's so Gaul basically now belongs to Caesar, and boom, that's how you do a campaign, folks. Now the next 2 years are spent cleaning up the last pockets of resistance, because remember, Caesar still had a few more years before he's allowed to buy his way back into the consulship. I mean, get elected, totally get elected to the consulship, buy it out here, then, like he did the first time. Finally, after 10 years, Caesar returns to Rome. But to complicate things, Crassus died while on a campaign in Parthia, and Pompey, feeling bold, got the Senate to actually revoke Caesar's governorship of Gaul. So even the triumvirate, which was supposed to be immune to the vices of factionalism, fell victim to the vices of factionalism. And this is not a good sign, right? So Pompey has now turned on Caesar. Crassus has died, so Caesar no longer has his two main allies to help him do what he needs to do. So Caesar got Pompey's note that basically said, ha, I made the Senate vote against you, so that way you can't have, your imperium anymore, right? Your diplomatic immunity. And Caesar astutely realized that going back to Rome on his own was essentially a death sentence, that he was going to be brought up on charges. So Caesar, feeling bold himself, said, screw it. And he brought the 13th Legion over the Rubicon River and into Italy. Now Pompey and most of the Senate proceeded to nope right the hell out of town and go to Greece, because you have quite literally an entire legion of Roman legionnaires marching on Rome itself. Now Caesar, rousing the support of the people, was proclaimed temporary dictator, right? Dictator, not dictator, because that's the English saying of it, but this original saying, temporary dictator, was actually Latin for speaker. And he was elected this, or proclaimed this, by the people, with the support of the people is really what I should say, with the goal of restoring peace to Rome. So even though he was technically the one who started the civil war, but details, he was given the authority to restore peace to Rome, even though he's the one that quite literally marched into Rome with an army and made the, Pompey and the Senate just flee Rome. But like I said, be quiet, the details don't matter, right? So he then proceeded to absolutely demolish Pompey's army in Greece at the Battle of Pharsalus against all odds, because Pompey actually had a much better trained army. See, he chased poor Pompey to the ends of the earth, which in this case is actually just Egypt. Okay, so the end of the Roman earth. And Pompey decides to seek refuge with the boy King Ptolemy, who owed him a favor. And he was very, very likely displeased to find himself beheaded instead. So that favor that, Ptolemy owed him ended up in a beheading of Pompey instead. Now, Caesar was absolutely horrified to see Pompey's head, because first of all, he was a fellow Roman citizen, but also Caesar was planning on pardoning him afterwards, not actually killing him. So the fact that Egypt and the boy king, Ptolemy actually beheaded Pompey, it really did affect Caesar, because that was not his plan at all. And this, my friends, is a lesson on how healthy communication can save lives, because Ptolemy, the boy king in Egypt, he thought that he was doing what Caesar wanted him to do. But again, Caesar was like, no, I was totally going to pardon him. Man, I can't believe someone lost their head over this. So healthy communication can actually save lives. But seriously, Caesar was super big on clemency, and that pretty much was his thing, except for the pirates that he crucified that one time when we talked about it at the beginning. But for the most part, he did actually forgive most of his, he pardoned a lot of his political and military opponents. Now, in addition to pardoning some people, tribes, and even entire towns during the Gallic campaign, Caesar pretty much pardoned most of Pompey's entire army and all of his supporters who fled to Greece with him. Think about that, right? This is the Senate and the man who turned on Caesar to make sure that if Caesar came back to Rome, he would be executed because he had broken so many laws while he was consul. And Caesar went so far as to pardon most of Pompey's army and all of his supporters who fled with him to Greece, and he was planning on pardoning Pompey himself, but unfortunately that didn't quite work out. Now, this is one of the most important aspects of Caesar's character, and he was certainly a controversial character, but it's important that we weigh the good with the bad. He broke a ton of laws and he sold his soul just to become consul, but he made moderate reforms that actually did benefit the people. He killed a lot of Gauls and Romans in the civil wars following his consulship, but he also granted clemency wherever he could. And he basically fashioned himself a king after he was appointed dictator for life. But he was beloved by his people, and he used his power to stabilize Rome. So all in all, he did do a lot of serious and lasting good for Rome's people. But that good was done through politically devious means for suspiciously power-hungry motivations. And this is where things get kind of muddled. Was Caesar a good guy or wasn't he a good guy? Because he was a dictator, and that's what I mean by we really have to weigh the good with the bad. He was liked by the Roman people, but he did a lot of things for them, except he did it in politically devious ways. He did it under, suspiciously power-hungry motivations for himself. And that's what makes him such a controversial character. And he's controversial for a really good reason. And I'm going to do my best to give you both sides of this right now, so that way you can get a feel for some of the questions, people like Brutus, who will later go on to assassinate him, were asking themselves while they were making the plans to assassinate Caesar. Because if he was so great, then why did he get assassinated? Now, during Caesar's time as dictator, which had been extended for 10 years, he managed to instate even more reforms and more reforms that promoted public welfare, government efficiency, and general stability. He also limited the political and military power of the provincial governors, mostly to stop other people from doing to him what he did to Pompey and the Senate, okay? So he limited the power of those governors so that way people couldn't go be a governor and, be a general for all of that time and then come challenge him for basically his dictator spot. So he realized, he learned from what he did and said, oh, I'm going to make sure that that doesn't happen again. He reformed the monstrosity that was the old Roman calendar so well, in fact, that we still use a version of it today. In fact, I saw something on Twitter the other day that somebody was talking about how, October, November, December, how, like, it's a shame that October isn't, the 8th month because, that's what octo means. And then somebody else had retweeted it with, whoever created this should get stabbed. And I was like, ha! Funny joke, it was Caesar, and he did indeed get stabbed. So if you see that Twitter thing flying around, you now know that, yeah, Caesar totally got stabbed. So did he deserve it? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. So he reforms the monstrosity that was the old Roman calendar so well that we actually do still use a version of it today. He also conducted a census. He carried out several building projects. He unified the Roman provinces that were closest to Italy, and was just all around a really solid leader. Did he pull a lot of super mega illegal stunts to get himself to this point? Yeah, absolutely. But did he make, substantially beneficial reforms for the people that, he loved? Yeah, absolutely. In March of 44 BCE, Caesar was named a dictator for life, and this made a lot of senators really antsy. Because at this point, He was basically a king. And Rome still very specifically didn't like kings, okay? That's why they overthrew their original king and became a republic. So, on the Ides of March, Brutus, Cassius, and about 60 other senators surrounded and killed Caesar in the theater of Pompey, which is super ironic, right? He dies in the theater of Pompey. Caesar's last moments are rather disputed, but my take on it is that when he saw Brutus, one of his closest friends, whom he had pardoned after he fought against him with Pompey, was a part of this conspiracy to assassinate him, he just essentially accepted his fate, he fell to the ground, and he struggled no more. And I don't think even Caesar was eloquent enough to have some fancy last words when, 23 knives are simultaneously stabbing him. But, it's been quite famous that he was all like, "E tu, Brute," right? Like, you too, Brutus? I really don't think that Caesar was quite so eloquent when he's having, 23 different knives stabbed simultaneously into him. The assassins, may have fancied themselves liberators and restorers of the Republic, but they didn't count on the fact that the Roman people really, really liked Caesar. They loved him because he was generous and he was a really effective leader. He took Rome from 100 years of civil war to stability, and the Roman people really liked that. So the Roman people turned quite quickly on all of the assassins, and the assassins flee Rome and head to Greece to build up an army and then enter Augustus Caesar, or as he is actually known, Octavian. And we will pick up there in the next lecture.